I think one thing that's also interesting is sitting back and being and really just peeling away those really small, banal moments and things that people say where there's like a real irony in it. My latest thing is I went to a time management seminar, and they talked about how you have to learn how to say no, and you have to learn how to say later, and then you have to learn how to delegate things, and you have to learn how to ask for help. And then I realized it's like, well, crap. If everyone's successful at doing the first two, then no one ever gets help, and no one ever gets delegated to, and nothing would ever really get done. And so I actually find that those are the things that like stick into my mind that I try that sometimes spin out. That like there's a lot of like little things, little banal things in life that we kind of take for granted, that we take as truisms that really don't make sense. And I think that that's kind of the power of the medium, because it's not linear. You can have thought and word at the same time, and you have thought, word, image, and narration at the same time, and those are like thought, word, image. That's four levels of communication happening simultaneously. And I mean, I'd be curious to hear all four of you talk a little more about that juxtaposition and what possibilities it creates for you in terms of storytelling and things you can be inspired by.
You're going to have to explain that more. I know I'm not the only one who doesn't quite know what to say to that. So say it again. What are you? What would you like?
Well, that in comics, and you just have so many layers. Between people. You can have somebody saying something and thinking something else. You could have you can have images. You have images that are juxtaposed against one another. It's simultaneous, and it's not necessarily linear. And so, I know, I'll say, Tyrell and I were talking about this a little bit, or Tyrell brought this up a little bit in a previous conversation about the non-linearity of comics. So I'm kind of interested in sort of how you think about that, or how you play with that.
I was thinking about Gary, because, what you've done is draw Gary in a very restrained manner, in a very simplified manner, and that works against or with the story, which is so grotesque and complicated, and that's really an interesting way to approach it to me.
Well, that's an interesting thing about comics, is that it's like, you like you guys were saying earlier, you choose how you draw somebody. You're not casting an actor. You're not tied to a voice. The reader has not only choices with, the voice that happens, but also if you don't have a thought balloon, they have a choice with what the person's thinking. And then they have a choice about how fast they read your comic or how slow they read your comic. And, no matter how hard you try to say, like, here's panel 1, 2, 3, 4 on the page, as soon as they turn the page, their eye's going to be drawn to one part or another part. And so even within the space, like the temporal space you're creating, they are making their own connections between what's important on that page and when it happened. Because if they see it first, does that mean it happened first, or does it happen first because you said it happened first? And then, with a lot of work too, it's like, well, if it's about real life, which part of that happened first? I don't know. It makes my mind just melt. It's awesome.
I always liked what Trudeau did in Doonesbury, which is to have the punchline before the last panel. And that gives you a funny kind of rhythm. He's playing with you. So you're laughing and getting it, and then there's an additional thing that happens in the last panel. And I think that's a wonderful layered way to do things.
Well, for myself, I think one of the things I'm interested in is memory and how our memories work. And so comics has been a good way to explore that, in the sense that you can have a book that by the end of the book you've delivered all this information about something, but you don't necessarily deliver it in the order in which it happened, but you can arrange it in the order that you want a reader to receive it, and at the same time, there's room for them to, put the book down, come back to it later, or there's certain things that are outside of your control in terms of how they're getting the information, like Tyrell was saying, with where they're looking on the page, or how closely they might look at visuals, or versus how closely they're reading the text. So,
Well, especially that's exactly what memory is too. It's like you have these disconnected memories, and you think about them like you're like, oh, I'm walking on the street and I see a piece of trash and that reminds me of something, or I smell this thing and then I think of my grandma and then I think of this and then I think of that, and it's just this completely disjointed way. And I think that, our natural inclination is always we want to order things. We want to say, well, somebody did this, or I did this because I did this and then this and then this and then this happened. But that's not really, I don't know, that's not really how people work. You don't think like, I'm going to, say yes or no to this person because I woke up this morning and I did this and I did this, or 10 years ago I thought this and then this. And, it's like completely disjointed,
I mean, what interests me is the, in terms of that question about layers, is the element of time, and again, the readership wild card that you get with comics, where slow readers versus quick readers, people who pay more attention to the pictures than the words. And I've gotten questions before from people who are like, what's more important in comics, pictures or words? And I'm like, there's like more things there, and there's like more stuff. But it's pretty interesting to me, because I come from a mother and a father. Like my dad is a literature guy and my mother is an artist, so it's like I kind of combined those elements, and that's like a really black and white way of looking at like what happened to me to make me into what I am. But now it's interesting that people are paying more attention to like the onion skins of comics, and what's happening within the pages, between the panels, that sort of thing.
That's a beautiful summary. I feel like maybe we should take a little break between panels if you feel like it's at a good point. Thank you to all of our panelists.
Thank you, everybody.
This was an amazing discussion.